we can, I guess, get to getting, and I will share my screen. All right. Hi, Panda. Oh, we have a guest on the podcast today. Panda, introduce yourself. I'm sorry. Is she upset because you're not petting her?
She becomes very jealous when I talk over a laptop. The same happens on daily stand-ups.
If you just stop scratching her, she just screams into the stand-up void.
Yes. If I talk to a laptop, so that's immediate reaction.
Okay, because you're not talking to her.
Yeah.
Damn, you jealous cat. All right. It's pretty within the spectrum of like cat behavior that I would expect, though. All righty. So let's kick this off. We are doing news on the 1st of June. I think we're covering, when's the last time we did this? May 22nd? So
yeah, I guess so. That was a bit a while ago.
Yeah. I mean, about 2 weeks. It's kind of what we're keeping up. Good average here. Got to feed the algorithm.
Yes.
But a lot has happened. Some good news, which is nice. And we can kick it off with, Artem, you said 11 European countries, as well as Joe Biden allowing...
Well, 11 European and 1 North American.
Yes.
For now.
Wait, Canada still says no?
Canada said, oh, sorry, 2. Yeah, but it's not 11 Europeans then, because Canada was among those 11.
Okay. So 10 European, 2 North American.
Unexpected.
Yes. Countries have finally remembered that the fight's not really fair when Russia can set up air bases and other military industrial complexes 10 feet from the border. And those are, air quote, out of scope, close quote, for all of these weapons that the West is supplying them with. And Russia has obviously been abusing this to, the most recent thing was, I think, the glide bombs, which is where they're taking all these old bombs of theirs, they're strapping wings on them. Soviet-era bombs, very old pieces of material, strapping wings to them, putting them on a plane, getting very close to the border, but not crossing the border, and just scorched earthing Luhansk and the northern part of the Kharkiv region. That was a very big part of their play when it came to leveling a lot of these villages that formerly existed, like Vovchansk. And up to this point, the West has not allowed Ukraine to actually counter that in any meaningful way. So the issue with that obviously becomes, Russia is standing 2 inches from the fence and shooting at Ukraine. Ukraine can't shoot back, which is idiotic. We previously discussed the Ukrainian word is oburenia. The pseudo scandal that was, Ukrainian striking Russian oil infrastructure and how the West got all pissy about that. But the West has seen the offensive in Kharkiv. Maybe the West has seen the destruction in the northern part of the Kharkiv region, where the Russians still haven't made any meaningful advances that I'm aware of. Are you aware of anything?
Well, no offenses, nothing new what is going on, but what news are not sharing with us. What I know from Ukraine news from the locals. So that very similar situation is happening on the neighboring region with Kharkiv. So they do the same. They do the same for
Swimming?
Yeah, small region, because some villages already vanished from the region. They don't exist anymore, and it's sort of gray zone that Russia has been trying to set up just for stronger position for any possible negotiations.
Yeah,
if that happens, of course.
Well, that's what they want. That is what Putin has apparently expressed publicly that he wants, and that is also what would be advantageous for Russia, because, just to remind everybody, when Russia wants to enter into negotiations, that means that they're losing and they need time to stop and rebuild their industry and supply their forces, regroup their forces, and prepare for another offensive elsewhere or along the same track. So that's what that means, because the Russians also are aware of the fact that the Western aid is now a-coming, and it's going to hit probably second half of June, early July, and that's going to change a lot. The Ukrainians wasted no time in striking Belgorod yesterday, within 24 hours after Joe Biden gave them the sign off, which is just beyond infuriating. You'd have to say it that way, but that's how it is, unfortunately. And Attackham's still out of the equation. Everything near heart. Yeah. So there's still a degree of hands being tied behind Ukraine's back, but hence the meme. Because I understand that the jurisdiction now applies to things near Kharkiv, and I think that we will see, well, hopefully, at least the NATO secretary got the rhetoric right. Ukraine has the right to defend itself and aggressively attack Russia, who is aggressively invading and attacking it, and that includes strikes on targets in Russia. It is a massive pity it took 2 years for the West to get to this point.
I don't think so. It's about that. I think the NATO secretary speaks bravely lately, not because of 2 years or his beliefs get changed, only because the NATO prepares itself for any action that Russia might go with. So it's the matter of preparation.
For what? Russia will never directly attack NATO.
It will never directly attack NATO, but it will it will provoke, for sure. And NATO has been preparing for provocation, like acts of terrorism in Europe.
Those have been. Well, that's actually we'll get to that.
Okay. Too early?
No, you're not too early. I'm just saying that I do have a dedicated slide for the things that you're starting to bring up. So
but that slide is for is about the states.
True.
Okay. Let's go for it.
No, we can scope this any way you want. I got no issues with it. I got time.
No, I have really interesting the comment about the next one, because we are getting here with the first one, so the states finally allowed to hit Russia with the American weapon, so that's cool, right? But yes. On the other hand, we people mostly never talk about the other northern part of Ukrainian border, so it's Belarus. So with Belarus, it's kind of a Russian ally, but we have no much of action from that northern direction, right?
Because it's behind the shit.
To the Kiev, yeah, and with that new rule in the game that Ukraine can finally hit the territory of aggression, Belarus becomes for us, I'll say, less of concern for the moment, because you never know. So it's because the sovereignty of that state is a bit questionable.
Correct. Well, that's a mild way of putting it. I think the sovereignty of the state is determined by a failed resistance movement, unfortunately, that had to flee the country in 2018 because the Putin-installed puppet that is doing his best to retain his position as Europe's last dictator and worst mustache at the same time has less of a hold on power than he and or Putin are comfortable with, which is why I think, to your point, we've generally seen less shit coming in from Belarus.
And nothing can, not much can be done, because when Westerners aren't happy with Ukraine hitting Russian oil infrastructure, Russia starts buying oil from Belarus. So for us, it's also sort of insurance that nothing comes from the northern direction.
So thesis statement for the West allowing Ukraine to conditionally expand the range of its not insignificant weaponry is point number one. It's unfortunate that it took this long. Point number two, the Belarus side has always been interesting, but I do think that the partisan movements within Belarus are much more active, and Belarus is much less under Putin's control than he wants it to be. I also think, in terms of swinging back to my first point about this being very late, and it's also infuriating to see people like Belgium who saying, Ukraine, you get one F-16 and you can only use it for sorties over, Ukraine's territory. So you're giving it an F-16, which has, its primary attack role is function as a dogfighter. The whole plane is engineered from the bottom up to excel in dogfighting with other aircraft. And if the Russian aircraft that is, for example, launching missiles over the Caspian Sea, for example, loaded up with glide bombs and is trying to turn a Ukrainian village into a parking lot. Again, this is mostly civilian infrastructure we're talking about here, which is suffering, not so much military infrastructure. The Russians have also been hitting energy infrastructure because, again, they're rushing. But Belgium's saying, no, you can't use our F-16 to shoot down a hostile Russian fighter if it's more than 2 feet over the line. And one more point I'll add about the gray zone. The gray zone is a larger Russian effort to fuzzy borders, which there's an element of it that is de facto gray zone, which is just the no man's land between 2 trenches. So if you have, and that's currently what it is right now. So at least that's what it was in northern Kharkiv. I'm sure you could speak to Sumy, but you have a Russian trench a kilometer away. You have a Ukrainian trench on the other side. They can see what they're doing. They are monitoring each other's movements constantly, maybe taking pot shots, things of that nature. And that's why the Russians haven't necessarily, partially why they haven't been able to make significant gains in northern Kharkiv, because they're doing stupid shit like sending fire teams across on foot, a kilometer of open steppe, or on the back of dirt bikes. And the Ukrainians are just turning them into a low-grade meat paste in that. So, I mean, the Russians are losing literally thousands of men per day. This is not sustainable, and they only had about 30K to start with. Artem, your predictions proved to be very correct in that regard, that their gains are insignificant in any kind of way. So, fuzziness of borders and Western weakness, taking too long to make decisions. Let's talk about what else that looks like. That also looks like,
This is good.
This is a good one.
This is bad, but this is good.
This is bad, but it's good. So we have these axes of geopolitical influence, right? And these axes of, I guess you could say, the fight versus freedom and bad guys. It sounds cartoonish to put it that way. I don't think the alliance of North Korea, Russia, Belarus, China, and Iran, and Hamas, by extension, can in any way be considered governments that are contributing to the net good of the world. That might shock some people. So in response to weakness on the part of the West, we see aggression. We see intent to expand territorially. We say increased use of soft power and all like the terrorist acts and the spy network shit that you were talking about previously. We'll get into that. And we see now China is launching some of its biggest military exercises ever, with the literal quoted goal of practicing how to seize power over the island. This comes in the riding in the coattails of President Lai in Taiwan, who was recently elected within the last week, and he's very anti-Beijing, and Beijing hates him. Insert meme here. And so, top right corner for those watching, you can see there was a Chinese TV sketch that came out, which is demonstrating where the communist Chinese would throw missiles were they to actually decide to invade the island. And spoiler alert, it's the US factories and it is the Taiwanese military infrastructure. So this whole thing of saying, oh, we don't want to escalate the conflict, fuck you, because they're going to escalate it anyways. The only thing you can do with a rabid dog is shoot it. The only thing you can do with a bully is hit it back. I do not have any idea why people still fail to understand this. And it shocks me and disappoints me on the daily. But it does not surprise me.
That's cool. That's cool. But like, if we when we talk about Taiwan and American factories on the island, so we understand that the manufacturing of semiconductors will be affected by any actions of the Beijing or any other parties that might participate. And from this point, we the first thought I had was a prisoner dilemma from game theory, but this dilemma is even worse in my opinion here, because with prisoner dilemma you have defined sides, what might do what and the consequences of that. Here we have even a situation that is a bit more complex, because on the one side, China is a trade partner of the United States or European Union or any other country we can talk about, and on the other hand, so China may like attack the island. So what it means, the more sanctions you apply to China, the biggest probability of the attack you have, because when you don't have no control of your economy, you need to declare a war, start a war, because you need some excuse for doing not so well, like on the trade side. On the other hand, if the trade is going on and war is not happening, so you're pumping up the potential enemy with money for the war of bigger scale.
Correct.
So, and there is no good outcome of that.
China, I think, is a much more complicated situation than what we have with Russia. There are still people may be surprised to learn that sanctions don't work nearly as well as you think they do. And just for example, only about a month ago, if I recall correctly, maybe you can let me know. Only about a month ago, the US stopped buying Russian uranium. So to recap, the Russians launched a full-scale invasion on 3 fronts of Ukraine, and the United States government continued buying over $1 billion worth of uranium annually from the Russians. And only now they stopped that specific one thing. The money flows are rough, and it's the only thing that is kind of nice and gives me some level of peace, I guess, some degree of peace, is that the China-US trade relationship is more interdependent than I think most people realize. So hopefully China, if they were to invade Taiwan, the US would actually do something about it. That's a big hopefully, because the only counterforce to what you're saying is the meme on the bottom right, which I found on our Twitter, unfortunately, American military Twitter. Some moron thinking that, again, the victim blaming here is just insane, that Taiwan is the one that's going to start the war with China. Taiwan is an island, sovereign nation. It's doing its own thing. It's extremely well developed in comparison to, it's one of the tigers of development. Very good trade partners with the Americans. Same thing with Ukraine. Been developing, doing its own thing since it's regained its independence from the Soviet Union. And yet somehow people are saying Taiwan and Ukraine are going to get the US in World War III. World War III is already going on.
Yeah, it's not like the war these days. It's not about the battlefield.
The battlefield's changed. There's no the green fields of France where the 100,000 men throwing themselves into the trench line anymore. That's just not how wars are fought. But there is no mistake here that World War III is going on. Whether or not you want to refer to them as disassociated micro conflicts is up to you, but it's all connected. Russia and intel fueled the October 7th Hamas attacks. North Korea is giving, North Korea and Iran are fueling Russia's military efforts in Ukraine. Russia is expanding into Africa to fight in Niger. Nothing is in a vacuum anymore. This is a multi-front conflict that the United States needs to understand that it is fighting whether it wants to or not, and that the price for failure is much, much greater than the price for us actually, not to use an engendered term, but to man the fuck up and to punch these people in the mouth with a very firm fist and say, look, y'all can do what you want in posture. These lines are drawn and we will enforce these lines. So the Chinese aggression, I think actually in terms of timing with this West's announcement that like, hey, look, we're going to let the Ukrainians bomb the shit out of Belgorod and Kursk and Krasnodar and all these places like that. I'm very curious how the Chinese will react in terms of these military exercises.
They already reacting. They're already reacting because I suspect they knew about the decision about the hitting Russian territory, so they're not going to the summit like in Switzerland at this moment. So that's the decision they've been made.
Okay.
So the summit will be without China or like any of their like, and what they did, in fact, one of the Chinese officials went to the countries of global South and tried to convince them not to participate in the summit.
That's cute. I'm not going to the party, so you shouldn't either. That's advanced diplomacy. They just don't tell you that at the Pentagon. So I guess main takeaway from this slide is there are a group of malicious actors in this world that will expand. They have imperialist I guess, is the lightest version we can say of this. The Chinese also, regularly commit genocide. No one wants to talk about the Uyghurs anymore. Those poor sons of bitches. Unless you talk about the Andrew Tates or the Alex Jones of the world that think that that's all made up. That millions of these people are not suffering in concentration camps. It's very smacks of the Holocaust denier logic, unfortunately. But these people are out there. They're going to enforce their worldview on everybody else unless you stop them. That is kind of the definition of how authoritarian rule works. You have a small group of people or a single person that want everything to be exactly like they want it, and you're going to get, in China's case, run the fuck over by a tank if you dare to stand in their way. So Tiananmen Square actually happened. Incidentally, YouTube algorithm. I'm sorry, I think I just tanked our popularity for this next one. But anyway, that's the takeaway. And it is not Ukraine's fault. It is not Taiwan's fault. These are sovereign nations. Taiwan is actual China. They are the non-communists that fought for freedom, and then they went to the island after Mao Zedong, who was such a bad dictator and ruler that he made Hitler and Stalin look like children. 50 million people of his own, at least he killed. Monster. So Taiwan was the Chinese that wanted to be China, actually, non-communist. And Ukraine has been around for thousands of years. And wouldn't you know it, the victim blaming narrative can be applied to countries as well. It's not Ukraine's fault that Russia is attacking other countries. Russia's been doing this forever, and people are just stupid, like you, the guy in the military photo. But anyway, anything else?
On this one, I mean, about Pen, I think we will not touch because that's the topic about Uyghur or like other Chinese territories or Hong Kong. They're so huge. They're worth of other like episodes.
Yeah, no.
Because when I meet guys here from Hong Kong, they say they're not Chinese. They're from Hong Kong. So their self-identification like very strict. Like don't call them Chinese.
That's what kind of spicy take is that? That's a Hong Kong spicy take. That's a kind of first Hong Kong spicy take, and I hope that there will be many more. But I'm very well read, so maybe we could figure something out. But love the self-identification, love the empowerment. In any case, so as an extension of our previous slide, as to the fact that these people exist, maybe that was the thesis of the previous slide, is that whether or not you want to admit it, there are bad people out there, and these bad political actors on an international scale. So reviving your question, Artem, about terrorist attacks throughout Europe, I'm gonna let you go. So, and Panda, if Panda wants to talk.
Always. That's what she does. That's her only job, usually in the morning. Yeah. So about the terrorist attack. So because Russia definitely is like not capable of any attacks on NATO countries, right? So we're not talking about the states. We're talking about like NATO countries, like even such small states as like Baltics. So they're relatively small states, but Russia will not dare. That will be provocation, but open attack will never happen. We understand it because like Russia is not a superpower; it's just a big undeveloped and a very aggressive country.
Mm-hmm.
So far, what we have.
Correct.
So, but with the notion of some soft power, Russia will perform provocations, and as we talked about that, that would like supersonic attacks on the states officials worldwide. So these things will happen. These things will happen more and more, and I don't believe that they will be grouped into somehow into one case, because there is no any central structure for like let's say anti-West provocations.
Or this form of hybrid warfare that Russia's very, very good at. If they're not good at tradition.
The only skill they can polish at the moment.
And have for as long as the Soviet Union existed and up to the present day. I mean, go back far in history, you can look at least I remember from my Russian degree, please correct me if I'm wrong, I remember the ruler and I remember the Gestapo equivalent brutal secret police force that they used to enable the will of the ruler. So
yeah,
the NKVD, at the KGB, the FSB. I remember all that. Even Ivan the Terrible had his own secret, brutal crackdown police force. All the czars did. That's just a Russian thing that we forget about. To this point, the takeaway here is that it's bits and pieces that will add up over time, but Russia will poke and prod and try to expand into any space that the West allows to expand into. So we see top performers at our three-letter agencies, FBI, CIA, NSA, being taken out with never before seen sonic laser radio frequency weaponry. The West is going to do nothing about that openly because they internally denied it. And there's no good way to classify it. It's not like they dropped a bomb in an American building. I mean, I see as the 9/11 scenario as an equivalent, but that's just bold in your face, sledgehammer in the mouth, terrorist attack. Now for we go war against you. Russians know that that's not viable, like you said. So what they are going to do is do all this other shit. They're going to take out the top performers at the clandestine agencies because the U.S. government, if they admit the attacks work, number one, they're admitting culpability that the U.S. government can't defend its own best performers. Number two, they're admitting clandestine operations and things that can't become public-facing against Iraqi. Russians, what else are they going to do? They're going to destroy fiber optic lines up near NATO's newest members, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Estonia. They're going to do it with a Chinese ship by just trawling an anchor over tens of miles, dozens of miles of fiber optic line that's critical for their infrastructure. They're going to do the same thing with gas lines. They're going to radio jam huge sections of Northern Europe around Kaliningrad, grounding every airplane in Finland and Estonia. They're going to do what you see on this slide here. They're going to just sit outside the houses of American Special Forces officers and monitor them. The only reason these people found out is because the guy just shot this Russian dude. He just got sick of the trespassing. He had tried to report it, and there was no path for reporting that was resulting in any kind of action on the part of the government. And what? Poland keeps arresting, Belarusian, Polish criminals that Russian secret forces are coordinating to fuck stuff up, burning down military intelligence warehouses. So this is what Russia does, and they're very, very good at it. And they're not going to stop, ever. Until we...
Yes. But stopping means like the whole stopping thing. The whole stopping thing only like we think that something should stop, like only because like we think that that all the battle which is going on like has to end somewhere at some point of time. But in fact, if we just forget that we kind of believed that the Cold War it's finished. So maybe it just transformed with the collapse of the Soviet Union. So it just mutated into some other like form due to like new technologies, like new countries, new borders. So
yes,
it's mutated. It never stopped.
I like that take. I would agree with that.
And when you say that the Russian got caught in America, that's only because that it's a European approach towards the public space that you don't have here, like in North America. Because here you can have a private beach. You don't have like free public access to water. Not always in North American countries. So, and it's opposite in Europe. You always have a public access. That's what Russians might do differently in the States because they got used to European rules of like means of like transportation.
I imagine it's much easier to move around in Europe once you're in there.
Yes, but also here you don't go to anybody's like lawn because it's not yours, it's private. Because people pay like taxes for their like small pieces of land. So yes. It's not always the case in Europe because land might be like public or like belong to community, to a city. So it's a bit different in Europe, so you never know. But here it's very strict, like true or false, 1 or 0. You may go or you may not.
I do like the subsequent conclusion that I've drawn from this, that U.S. property taxes are the price that you pay to have the right to shoot a Russian spy in your yard.
Right. Okay, we call it right, but I think people think that they're obliged because this is the like keeping order in order.
I'm going to let you riff on the European perspective because you know it better than I do, especially given where you have lived and how it interacts with Russians.
A bit.
A bit, he says, being modest, but okay. Larger point being,
I don't have that experience that some Ukrainians have, and they say that the air like during the summer stinks of the dead bodies. So it's a bit different. And of course, dead fashion because no one buries them. No one picks them up. Like, what's going on there? They're just rotten there.
Rotting where?
In the fields.
Oh, you're talking about Ukrainians in Ukraine.
Yeah. Ukrainians in Ukraine. That's what you said. I have experience. Yeah. No, I don't have all the experience. I know that only what people can share.
Yeah. No, I was speaking to your time in Central Europe, which is in a place that is unfortunately chock full of Russians. But
that's another soft power thing. So using European guilt to infiltrate Russian agents as many as possible.
Why is it guilt?
I don't know. Europeans usually blamed for not allowing immigrants or refugees to stay in their countries, and Europeans play this game voluntarily. They agree that they owe to people that are not their citizens something for some reason.
I always thought it was a more racial argument than that, but I see how it could be framed as a socioeconomic argument, which would then also include the Russians. Okay, big takeaway, but yes. So the Russians, I can speak less to the Chinese and terrorists in the Middle East, but the Russians certainly will use every avenue. They will use every tool in their tool belt, every weapon in their arsenal to expand their influence and to enable chaos and disruption. So, and I guess just to drop the last little slide in the center there is one other thing that they've done is they've taken the Narva River, which is the border between Estonia and Russia, leading into the sea, and they have just started taking buoys out of it. The buoys there are important because they designate where the border is. They designate whose waters are whose and who can operate in which waters doing which things. So Europe is upset about this, but they're just upset about everything. That's all they can really do in a lot of cases is express that they're upset. The Estonian PM, and if we're going to talk about anybody that really understands the danger of Russia, it would be Estonia in the Baltics, because they got their shit together immediately after the Soviet Union dissolved. The Estonian PM is calling this quote unquote a shadow war that Russia is leading against Europe, and is calling for all the things, Artem, that you said are not currently existing, which is open dialogue about the terrorism, open dialogue about the special forces operations Russia is conducting in Europe, treating this as a single body of an execution of their soft power, right? These are not isolated incidents, creating the web, bring in the Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme, but bringing it all together and treating this as the Russian Federation seeking to undermine European power, influence, and stability. But whether or not Europe can do this, we don't know. Hopefully a few old white men at the Pentagon can keep a pulse on things. Anything you want to add to this?
No.
Okay, great. This is just a feel-good story that I found. Did you see this?
No. I mean, I know what was the butterflies about, but I don't know the story.
Yeah. So very recent, there was yet another guy that is living in the village of Torske, which is very close to the contact line at Donetsk. Wouldn't you know it, we have another 70-year-old guy who just decided that he's sick of being too close to the Russians. So after the Russians had initiated and strengthened their campaign of arbitrarily bombing civilian infrastructure into the ground, as we discussed, the explosion started reaching closer and closer to his house. He decides, screw this. I'm going to go find another house with my cows and my dog. And he just puts them on a rope and he walks 40 some miles just out of the Donetsk region, with his cows, 3 cows, and his dog. His dog's name is Zhorik,
No.
but right, it's a good dog name. And the reason that he says he left were twofold. Number one, the Russians has started just randomly blowing shit up everywhere. Just, he said, I think if you read the story, he quotes from 10 or 11 p.m. all through the night, the explosions do not stop for a minute. Point number one. Point number two, the Russians had spread these PFM-1 mines, which the Ukrainians, I understand, refer to as pelustke. They're butterfly type mines. So they're just a cassette type anti-personnel mine that you put them in these people that are watching. For the people that are listening, I have 2 pictures on the screen. Number one is an individual PFM-1 mine. Number two, it's a container of them kind of stacked together, and you launch them from a larger projectile and they drift down to the ground like the helicopter leaves. And if you step on one, you'll lose a limb. So that's what the guy said. The Russians covered the earth in these things where they live. And as soon as you step on one, you are crippled. And as soon as your livestock steps on one, you can't tell a livestock, a cow, not to step on these things. So he just bailed out. He walked by apparently established Ukrainian armed forces position in Kharkiv, and they walked up to him with his 3 cows and his dog, and they're like, "What are you doing here?" He says, "I've come from another world." Once he said he got about 6-7 kilometers away, so 3-ish miles from his house, he saw a big fiery explosion engulf the area where his house was. But this is a happy story. It ends. The Ukrainian armed forces picked him up, asked him what the hell he was doing. His story's checked out because he actually speaks Ukrainian, obviously. The Russians cannot speak Ukrainian. They went and there was another Animals, I think is what the initiative is called. They also got him and his 3 cows and his dog set up in a little abandoned house in the Poltava region, and he's living his best life. But Artem, to your point about experience, people that know, like that American guy did not know and went to fight for terrorists. This is another real life example of Ukrainians, never being too old to just never bend over backwards in the face of bullshit. This guy's 70 years old and he just up and walked 60 kilometers out of here with his cows. He took his cows. Russians, when they invade villages and they take territory, they just mass execute all the animals. They leave them to die in cages. This is very much a Ukrainian story of a guy that just loved his animals and got them out. So
but this is when you say Russians execute everybody around, because this is the behavior of fear. Because they got to the point when they finally started believing that Ukrainians are not Russians. They cannot trust them even if they don't attack them openly. And now they don't trust that they attack them later. I mean, civilians. So that's why they started just killing like everybody around they see. They didn't do it at the beginning of 2022 right away. They started it with Bucha, but that was already not like in winter. That was spring.
That was April, and that was already a month and a half, 2 months in. Yeah.
So they finally realized like they're not Russians, they're not welcomed, and like people will fight back.
That is a dissonance in the narrative that was very common back in the day. So these Russians, a lot of these younger kids especially, that are fresh out of some idiotic Russian military academy, they were told that they'd be welcome to Ukraine with open arms, but the Ukrainians had the language skills to tell them, like, go fuck off, you are not welcome here, we don't want you here. And if the Russians decided to ignore that, you have a long history of effective Ukrainian partisan sabotage and campaigns inside of occupied cities, like in Kherson. Before Ukraine liberated Kherson, I think there was several rulers, I guess, effective Russian-installed rulers, that it got to the point where no one in Russia or wanted to take the job because they knew that a car bomb would just be waiting for them in occupied Kherson. So the unfortunate, I guess you bring up a very valid point. The unfortunate side effect of that is that Russians just mass execute everybody and everything because they have no regard for human life, including their own. But this is a happy story in any case. This guy just up and walked down.
Okay, let's try with the happy story. If the man has its own farm again, what would be the best name for the farm? Like, I'll give you a hint. What about based on the dog's name?
Zhorik. I think the dog's name is Zhorik. I might be lying to you. Let me double check real quick.
Well, if it's Zhorik, the Georgia, Georgia for a farm name. Georgia.
Georgia.
Yeah. Because the name of the dog, that's just you see it immediately. The farm, Georgia.
I'm missing the reference.
It's George name for the dog.
Oh, that is okay. Sorry. You're right. That makes sense. That would be the Cyrillicized equivalent of George. Wonder if it's a girl dog now. I don't know. They didn't mention that in the story, but in any case. Okay, the farm is called the Georgia Farm now. We can establish that. All right. Be sure to write Ukra Pravda and tell them to get that published. And then one more, I guess. Happy story. This is a good picture. I don't know if you watched the highlights. Did you watch the highlights?
Yeah, I watched the highlights and I watched the fight the next day. So it's some sort of modern Ukrainian stand-up.
In what sense?
Well, in the sense that the way we can communicate in sports. The fun part was, regardless the result, before even the result. So the first time I see the Tyson's shorts, skirt, I don't know how to call that part of clothes.
I don't know, it was like a disjointed, weird.
So that was a cool prevention from a smaller opponent. Because usually smaller opponents, they try to reach for a liver punch. And with that kind of clothes, that was impossible, because you cannot say that liver is not located under the chest. It's a bit lower, and that was covered with the belt.
It's still 6 inches, 30-pound difference, but he had the fake setup such that he can get that left over the top, right into Fury's mouth. But that's also, I mean, it's a kind of indicative thing at Fury. I think Fury doesn't historically do well with people that are also bullies, because he's a bully. He bullied Klitschko, just to the nth degree when he was fighting him down. It was kind of a boring match to watch, but still. And, just like Usyk had with Joshua, just that left hand, setting up that left hand right over the top. And I know people are saying like, oh, Fury dominated the early rounds, but that ref waited a long ass time in the 9th round to let Fury have his little count there. Whereas if you watch that thing, there's good 15 seconds where I think any other ref would have said that, Fury has not punched for, he's not even throwing a punch in any kind of way. His arms are barely up. He's not defending himself. He's just kind of not falling over, skating around like a cow on an ice rink. But was split decision. Usyk is now the undisputed heavyweight champion, first one 24 years since Lennox Lewis had it in 2000. He vacated his previously undisputed cruiserweight titles to come up to heavyweight and just take everything from everyone. This is a legendary boxer. Whether or not you like him, whether or not you have issues with his record, whether or not you think Fury was treated, whatever. Also, Fury, known for not being a class act, confirmed his status as not being a class act after he immediately went on and said that Usyk only won because his country's at war, which is that's Tyson Fury. Yes, Ukrainian, an actual Cossack. Usyk, I think, kind of has a bit of a.
Yeah, he has a sentiment for that part of our history.
And a little bit of Shadovarshana.
But yeah, we call it
a lot of Shadovarshana.
A lot of, but that's probably the message that was designed for people definitely just to see it and to notice.
How would you translate? How would you describe the idea of Shadovarshana for the English language viewers?
That's a tough one. It's not like primitivism. It's like extreme simplification in very vivid colors.
Would you say that kitsch is an element of that, or no?
Yeah, probably the closest one would be kitsch.
No?
Because it seems like it's like Ukrainian traditional clothes, but what is Ukrainian traditional clothes? So we tend to think that it's something from the 17th, 18th century. But back then, that was just the best technology to make clothes.
Yes.
So, okay, we like it, we appreciate that, but whatever you see these days, not always the most accurate reference to that term.
I think it is endearingly fun that he chooses to go with that. I also like Usyk just generally more as someone who is from Crimea and he understands what's going on, as opposed to some other Ukrainian boxers that have problems with saying that Russia is a problem and who shall remain unnamed in this podcast.
Power of soft power.
Yeah. Yeah. But the idea that he leans into the Cossack thing, I think is fun. This is another thing that is purely Ukrainian that Russians stole from the Ukrainians, that the Ukrainian Cossacks are Ukrainian Cossacks because there was no such thing as a Russian Cossack ever in the history of Russia.
That was some perversion of that term, like towards a, what do you call it? Volunteers, the war volunteers, because Russian Cossacks was always the like
Mercenaries?
sort of mercenaries. Yeah, exactly. Because it was the same in Balkans in 90s. Just the same. That was the same in Moldova in 1992. It was the case in 2014, like in Donbass region, and it was the same, if I'm not mistaken, with Japan, 1905.
The
Cossacks,
Russians using the Russo-Japanese war or the Cossack thing even there?
Yeah, but we have even the like these propaganda posters.
Wow. Okay, I want one of those actually.
Okay, I'll try to find it.
You don't have to do. We can link up after the call to deliver,
okay.
but because I'll be stateside later this year. But yeah, I mean, just the main point being the Ukrainian Cossack is redundant because all Cossacks are Ukrainian. So that military identity was then perverted and stolen by the Russians and used widely. But Usyk leans into this. I think it's cool. I think it's good for the image, and he, like him or not, he's earned it. The guy's a monster.
Yeah.
Records for punches landed, records for punches thrown, records for people overthrown, undisputed in 2 weight classes. First united heavyweight, I think, no, not ever. He's the first 4-belt heavyweight in a long-ass time. But anyway, there's too many leagues in boxing. But
now, yes.
Yeah, that's all I got. There'll be 7 leagues by the time we do our next episode.
Oh, wait. Maybe we'll do 2 internets.
All right. Anything else, Dad?
Nope.
Right.
Nothing at all.
Let's call it here. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.